Hey everybody, welcome to the Cyber Monday show. Let me welcome our dear friend Makeshift. What's up, good sir?
Oh man, what's going on?
It's wrong. It's like we got daylight savings time, so it's like so bright right now, and I'm not used to it.
You're like, there's still sun outside.
Oh, it's horrible. We like normally it's like
No,
the
it's
sun's
not horrible.
going. Oh, it's awful. I'm a winter person. I like the darkness. So like we're like normally whenever we go to the gym, like the sun's setting while we go there, and then it's like pitch black by the time we're out. It was like very much still daytime whenever I left, and it's like the sun's still up right now. It's very confusing.
I like that though because I'm very much a summer person. Like you in the summertime, you will literally catch me wearing a tank top, flip flops, and gym shorts. Like I'm very much like a beach vibing type of person. So when it's warmer, man, I'm all for it.
So what you doing in Michigan then? Or well, I don't know if I just doxed
That's a
you.
really good question. I ask myself that every summer.
Yeah, L says that I'm a vampire, and that is precisely it. I'm a
She's one to
vampire.
talk.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We are holding loose for just a minute, but first we want to dive into some updates with Republic of Hackers. There's a lot of like cool new things going on, and I want to make sure everybody is familiar with it before we dive into things. So, Meg, what are we diving into?
So, what I will hint at, because I haven't gotten full confirmation that I can disclose these details, April 1st at roughly, I believe, 6:30 p.m. Let me just double check this real quick. Do, do, do. Uh, bu- bu- bu-
This is the podcast.
7 p.m. Eastern time. 2 hours. We have a fun little class going, but I won't tell you who and I won't tell you what. But just mark it on your calendars. April 1st. This is not a joke. I promise you that. It would have been a really good joke, but it's not a joke.
Yeah, that date, that timing is quite unfortunate. The timing's quite unfortunate.
It kind of is. I know.
Yeah, this is a bit of a teaser, but I do have a very special video coming out that day. Also not a joke. I do have a video coming out that day. So stay tuned.
Oh man, see,
But,
look at it. Like all the fun stuff's happening, you know.
Right.
April
Yeah.
1st.
So there's that going on. I'm seeing a lot of folks diving into the Security Plus right now.
Yes.
Some really interesting discussions right now on getting some study sessions set up, like weekly, bi-weekly, stuff like that. So pretty exciting stuff. If maybe there's folks watching or that will be watching this later that are interested in the Security Plus. What advice do you have for them as they're kind of ramping up their studies right now?
Well, because I know we've got we've got a study group for the Net Plus, we got a study group for the Security Plus, we've still got our study group for the EJPT, and we still have one for the OSCP. I can't speak too much on any of the non-CompTIA ones, but just from my experience taking the CompTIA one, it is something that you are not going to want to underestimate. It is, and I never have taken the Net Plus. I've only taken the Security Plus, but it's another CompTIA exam. These tests are hard. They are going to test you. It is mainly on your memorization, but it's also making sure you know in what particular scenarios like the best option. It's not just, whatever's what you think is correct. It's what's most correct. Because literally all four of those answers are right. It's just which one's more correct for the particular situation or scenario that they're giving you. But yeah, I mean, and like I forget who I was talking to about it. It may have been L. Take your time studying. Make sure you've got these things down. Make sure you understand, the acronyms. Make sure you have all this stuff memorized and just take your time learning it, because otherwise you're going to be in a situation that I was just, a year or so ago where I thought I was hot stuff and knew this. I was like, oh, I'm going to pass this. Like I've passed every other test in my entire life, and started taking practice tests and started bombing them. And it was like, nope, we're not doing that. And I put my nose to the grindstone and I studied for 2 weeks straight, 3 hours a day, and passed. But it was like, that was not how I wanted to go into that exam.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I feel like I kind of had a similar trajectory there where, I thought I was ready to rock. And then similar to you, I started taking some of the practice tests and I got humbled very quickly.
Yeah.
But to your point, kind of the start on just the kinds of questions, I don't know how specific we can get on that, but I definitely think it is a test on confidence of your understanding and the logic. Like you said, like what is the best answer? And you kind of like, to some degree, you have to be like going into that test confident that you can identify that quote unquote best answer. Which is, I don't know about you, but I overthink things quite frequently, and especially on tests where you can like go back and forth on the questions, and maybe you pass a question, you're like, I want a different answer on that one. I can't tell you how many questions I've ended up getting wrong because I went backward and I had the correct answer originally selected, and I selected myself out of the right answer. So definitely some confidence there too.
And yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things like, and I think again, if you take your time studying, making sure you understand the material, you won't second guess yourself as much. Like, I know there were a number of them where it's like, you're looking at the question, you're sitting there going like, oh my gosh, which one is the most right? What I think a lot of people don't do, at least I wasn't doing it at first, is looking at them and going, okay, which ones are like the most wrong? Like, take those out of the equation, get them out of here, and then you're left with at least a 50% chance, of getting it right. Because like I know some of the questions, and they may not ask it so much on the 601, but I know on the 501 it was like, oh, this is the particular scenario, what would be the best, type of encryption or whatever to use. And it's like, well, obviously, one is going to be better than the other, but it's like your knowledge of which one is the best. Like I said, it goes back to which one is the best of those answers. Having no encryption is horrible, so having some level of encryption is great, but which one of those is going to offer you the best protection?
Mm-hmm. There's like some almost like a history element to some of the encryption algorithms too that I noticed, where it'll kind of take you through some like the older encryption algorithms and standards, and then walk you through to like the more accepted, the more secure algorithms of today. And so there's that one also got me a little confused because it's some of it's a history lesson. I'm a history guy, but you're kind of mixing history and math, and I'm not a math person, so.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like I've had a bunch of people and I feel bad about it, but like they've reached out to me and they're like, oh, like what are some things that I can, like, do you have any study guide material or anything that I can use for my exam? And I go, I would if you were taking the 501, but you're taking the 601. And I know, that they are covering more cloud-based stuff than they are cryptography. Like it's still there, but it's not to the degree that it was in the 501. Which is a good thing because I think that we need to be able to focus more on the cloud stuff. It's becoming a more emerging type of technology. You've got AWS, Google, and Azure. And I think there's like a couple other ones that have like smaller cloud platforms, but those are the big three, But it's like, yeah, with a lot of people and a lot of corporations starting to kind of move to that so that they're not having to have their infrastructure or whatever on site, because then you have to deal with updating it and everything. That I think that it is very beneficial to have that in the Security Plus now, which I'm actually, part of me is kind of like, I don't want to say regretful, but like jealous that they're covering cloud, because now I'm having to go back and study it on my own. And even like, because we have a cloud that we use at work and I'm trying to, learn it as I go. So yeah, I think they're some of the kids that are passing that nowadays are going to have a little bit of an upper hand on some of us older vets now. I can say vets now.
I definitely agree. I think that's nice. It's great that they're doing that they're kind of integrating cloud into that core standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, like the folks looking for the entry level cybersecurity roles right now are a bit more up to speed on today's technologies than where we were even just like 2 years ago. I don't know if we've talked about it, before on the show, but what got you interested in the Security Plus and got you motivated to take it?
So the thing that got me interested in it was I think I had actually talked to somebody about, wanting to make more of a push to go towards cybersecurity because I'd already had a degree in it. And I wasn't doing anything and I was just working in help desk. But I wanted to make that transition from help desk to infosec. And somebody had been like, oh, well, like what certifications do you have? And I was like, I've got two Microsoft fundamental ones, one for security and one for networking, and that's about it. And they're like, oh, you might want to like take a gander over at CompTIA's Sec Plus certification. And that was pretty much what geared me towards it. And, obviously looking at some of the more entry level certifications, like that was kind of hit on almost all the time. And I think even talking to Josh, or, you guys might recognize him more as the Raven, he was one that sat back and was like, if this is something you want to do, this is a certification you are definitely going to want to get because it is just a really good entry level, covers a very broad aspect and, spectrum of cybersecurity. You get a little bit of the blue team, you get a little bit of the red, they cover a little bit of GRC, just very fundamental understanding of it, but enough that you should feel comfortable getting a entry level position after passing it,
Yeah, I like that, and I don't think that I knew that you studied cybersecurity in college.
Yes, that is a
Yeah,
fun little.
yeah. No, that's interesting because I went to school with obviously a lot of other cybersecurity majors. Not all of them are in security. Actually, not all of them are in tech now. So it's kind of interesting to see kind of how that goes, and it kind of makes me wonder what we might be missing generally. And we talked about this with Alexandria a little bit. Where like it's program to program, and it's very variable. It's highly varied. In the quality of degree program and what everybody's learning. But how how equipped do you think your average cybersecurity major for an undergrad is prepared for an entry level cybersecurity position without building on it with something else?
That is a good question. Main reason is if I had to go based off of my personal college degree, I would say not well equipped at all. I think it's still a very new field that a lot of colleges are starting to kind of ramp classes and programs for. I still don't think that we're to a point where I would feel comfortable necessarily hiring some people, depending on where you go again, right out the gate with just a cybersecurity degree. Because, like, if I'm being honest, I would not have hired myself if after I graduated because of how ill equipped I felt. I mean, there were like, and I'm not saying that like it's bad to know this programming language, but like I studied C++ in college for cybersecurity. They didn't
Yeah.
have Python. I didn't.
Well, and
No,
even on that, like how confident were you in C++? Because like I took Python and Java, and I can't tell you I can't tell you I'm like a programmer. I'm familiar enough that I can read through it and kind of tinker with it, but which is good enough, right? But you know, to the degree of technical proficiency that we're talking with some of the courses, how deep do you think it gets?
I mean, for C++, I felt very competent. I was getting to a point where I was just kind of starting to write some of my own code just because I was bored and I wanted to kind of tinker around with it.
Yeah.
Um, Now, mind you, I'd only taken a beginner's and an intermediate course in it, so it was 2 semesters. And I was actually kind of upset because the intermediate course covered everything that the basic course did, and then just like a slight bit more. Um, I won't go down in the rabbit hole and jump on my soapbox about how bad my professor was at teaching the course because yeah, it was. I won't down that. It was not great. But I felt confident at least a little bit in knowing some C++ and being able to help other people. But it was just like knowing what I know now. I wouldn't have taken that course. I'd have tried. In fact, I probably wouldn't honestly have even gone into college because it was 9 years wasted, a bunch of money. And I mean, I'm not even using it. The main reason why I even got my job is because I have my, my Sec Plus, and then I showed and put myself out there on Twitter. That is really the only reason why I ended up getting my job. That degree has meant nothing to me. But kind of going back, like, I think honestly, like anybody watching this later on, like if you're really wanting to, if you're 18 years old or younger or whatever, and you're wanting to get into cybersecurity and you're just absolutely hell bent on going to a college, go to WGU. I've never been there. This is not sponsored, none of that. But from what I've heard from people, and even a good buddy of mine named Colonel Panic on Discord and on Republic of Hackers, he is going there. The reason why I really, really enjoy their program for cybersecurity is that you are actually going towards passing legit certifications that are, industry standards, like the Sec Plus, like the Net Plus. You're taking I think there's like the ITIL level 4 or whatever. Like you take that. There's a ton of other different certifications that you're taking that are very well recognized, very well, in demand in the workplace and everything. And I think that is just the better way to go about it. I just think that, I don't know. I just feel like a lot of colleges, and again, I could be wrong. And if I am, please, somebody call me out on Twitter or in the comments below. But I just feel like a lot of colleges just try to merge cybersecurity as just another little thing of IT. And they don't really understand that it's like, okay, well, you have IT over here. Cybersecurity is a whole other beast. Like there's other concepts that you have to know, and you have to understand things on such a deeper level, and I just don't think they go that as deep as you need to.
Well, and kind of bouncing off of your point, I feel like it's complicated where you do have to educate folks on those IT and computing fundamentals. Like you'll have like your computer information systems track, which will kind of like So I've learned a lot about this because of my dad, because he teaches this, right? And so you'll have like your CIS track that's like in like the College of Business, and it'll kind of like teach you some of the managerial stuff. Then you'll have like your computer science track that'll be in like your liberal arts college that's like way more technical. And so like both CIS and computer science are things that we need to at least be familiar with. And if you think about the Security Plus, both of those definitely have hands in the curriculum. And so you can't really escape that. So like in a 4-year degree plan, you got to knock out all the general eds. You gotta get some sort of familiarity with, some CIS or computer science courses, whichever, school. They might put their cybersecurity course in like the liberal arts college, and it's more computer sciencey, or they'll put it in their business college, and it'll be more CIS-y, right? But you need to get like some sort of fundamentals on those courses, and then maybe like part of your 300 level, some of your 400 level. That's whenever you're finally getting into cybersecurity. And like you said, it's so complicated. There's so much to cover that in just 2 semesters, realistically, how much can you actually dive into? Yeah.
Well, and this is going to be, we're
Let's dive into it.
We don't even need John. We're just going to run down this rabbit hole. Oh man, I'm so glad that we're touching on this, because man, it is just I disagree with gen ed classes. I think
I don't know.
If you are going for something like cybersecurity or IT or whatever, something that's specialized, because that's what you go to college for, your gen ed courses, that was high school. You took all your gen ed. You should know how to read a book, and about enough history to be able to have a very well-rounded conversation with somebody. when you go to college, your maths, your social studies, histories, whatever, sciences, all that out the door. I don't need them no more. Because what I think you should do is you go to go for bachelor's, 4 years. 2 years, if you're going for cybersecurity, covers CIS. So that you have that knowledge as a foundation for when you then take the next 2 years and you study your cybersecurity concepts. I think you're going to cover a lot more, like a ton more bases. You're going to be able to absorb more information, and you're not going to feel so like, oh crap, like I took 2 years of gen ed and then I had to cram 2 years of CIS, and then they just ship you out with a bachelor's degree. And it's like, no, like you're not going to know anything.
It's hard, yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think that like internships are also like a really critical component to the whole program, but it's often, I feel like it's left to the student to take initiative and drive that. Whenever in some degree programs I've heard of and have seen, they'll actually integrate, they'll put they'll put the students in a really good position to get some pretty interesting internships. And I feel like, and this is just my opinion, where over the course of 4 years in a degree program, you should be pumping out subject matter experts in the field. And I feel like, personally for me, coming out of my and again, nothing against the program. I think this is the case with just about any college degree. We're pushing out subject matter familiar people, but not necessarily SMEs. And I get that, getting that SME title really also requires some experience, requires a lot of things, but you can at least kind of get a pretty decent amount of the way there if, in that 4 years, you're being very diligent with the time, with internships, the courses that are being taught, the detail and the technicality in which those courses are covering, those topics. I kind of agree. There's a lot to be desired in most cases, my program as well. But, and there's also some examples where there are some courses that are super helpful. I feel like I had some real educational breakthroughs personally in college, so I don't regret it at all. And I think that I was able to get some internships thanks to the program. But at the same time, yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. I feel like I would have had a much, much more challenging time going for the Security Plus if I just went after it raw. I didn't go after it with some of at least the fundamentals that I'd learned, in school.
Well, and I mean, even the thing, and I mean, I guess again, I feel like I'm kind of that's what I'm looking for, like an outlier as far as this goes. But like, I know like a lot of people, when they go to get even a help desk position job, they're, a lot of places are kind of requiring them to have that A+ certification so that they have an understanding of, again, a baseline understanding of networking, a little bit of security, just how an overall computer works, different computer components, and how to, build a PC and all this other stuff, and just ways that you can troubleshoot one. And like, I didn't have that. I learned all that stuff on the job, and a lot of the stuff too that like, I guess you would normally maybe come across even in the A+, like I didn't ever even touch on the job. Like I was never really ripping apart machines unless it was like in my free time, and we had 2 machines that were dead and I was just like, oh, Frankenstein, But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I think that if you're going to do the college stuff, you really need to have some people that understand cybersecurity and these concepts, teaching them, or do something along the lines of what, like I said, WGU is doing, where they're like, we're just going to have you guys as, and again, I have never gone there. So maybe, somebody else who's gone there or knows a bit more about it than I do can fill in. But I just like the fact that they're having you take, industry certifications, that for me is just preparing you better to get into this field.
Yeah, well, I agree. And talking about, someone that is excellent, with cybersecurity and excellent at teaching people, I think, ladies and gentlemen, Whalen.
Hi, I am I am present now.
Sure, what's up? Hey, no problem, no problem. Time zones stink. Not gonna
Yeah.
lie, let's all go on one giant time zone.
Yeah, I was just listening to what you were saying about the college portion, and for example, I took a college course and they talked about wide area networks, and they were talking about Server 2008, and this was in last year, and I was like, it's outdated,
Yeah, and that's another one of those challenges with the structure, right? Is updating the curriculum, and you need the textbooks to kind of reflect the curriculum, and then even if you wanted to and you didn't have like the quote unquote like the regulatory, I guess infrastructure that might slow things down, just the logistics, getting enough books printed out and deployed in that kind of time frame, it's just hard, and that I feel like the internet has kind of, at least for me, made me feel a bit spoiled with acquiring information, where it's just easier to Google things and find it online. But in some cases, I mean, college can be such a powerful thing. We were talking about internships too, and just kind of the networking potential there. Yeah, it's kind of a trade off in some ways.
I was even gonna say too, to John's point, like it was like one of my very first like intro level CIS classes, and we were studying Windows 7.
Yep.
Windows 10 was like literally on the verge of coming out. It was like, why are we learning this? Like, I understand it's still being implemented. Like, not everybody can update to Windows 10, but I'm like, at least maybe touch on some 8.1 or something,
I think the important things to talk about, especially when conveying a new technology, is more so what the functions are. Because if we look back at the attack framework, we have a series of techniques, and some of those techniques are interlaced between each other, right? And that's why my big focus has always been on GRC. I've done a lot of different positions, from analyst to ops to network engineering, and they all come back to the same thing. And 3 out of 4 deliveries and attack methods exploit human behavior. And how do you control human behavior is with policies and standards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen.
Absolutely, and I kind of want to dive into that, into your path through GRC. But first, as all I want to kind of help people get to know you. Do you mind just kind of going through your history in cybersecurity, kind of what got you into that, what got you into GRC, and your journey thus far?
Absolutely. So I first started off in the military as a long haul radio operator. So I was doing HF, UHF, VHF, and ComSec. And then I got when they upgraded to new equipment, we started having commercial enterprise systems and solutions. So I was educated. I was sent to training for network and system management. And then as I spent time in those fields, I started to get into, ISO and managing security components to systems that were being deployed. And at the same time, I was still also doing frequency and spectrum management. And all of those things come back to standards, right? Oftentimes, when you have something that's using a radio, you can't just go and turn it on. You have to comply with what the airwaves require. If you're going to be on a satellite, you need to have everything controlled, a system access request, all of those details. And then I spent time in various fields. I spent a year as a civil servant in the government, and I managed compliance for 2,000 websites. And that was a lot of learning and development. And in that, I learned that the important part is conveying what needs to happen and how that needs to happen.
Gotcha. I love it. That's cool. And I always love when they're finding more people that started off or were in the military. How did that help? You talked about getting into the working as a radio operator, right? How did that kind of set you up for cybersecurity and GRC down the road? And like you said, with more, like you said, the compliance end of it, operating radios in a way that the airwaves require, as you said. How is that, I guess, the logic from that kind of transferred towards GRC and kind of trying to fit, business operations within the logic of compliance?
Yeah. So I think the way I can convey that is you have to understand that the systems we use also transmit on a whole backbone, and it's kind of invisible now in our society, right? Like you just we walk somewhere and we have Wi-Fi everywhere, and we don't think about the infrastructure behind it and how that works, and the components that go into how that internet and how that resiliency happens. How is it you can take your phone and walk away from your house and it transitions all of that traffic to your LTE or 5G connection? And one of the things that I found is to encourage it. Oftentimes, I think the detriment of a lot of people in security is we offer overtly technical answers that are frighten people when we come about. And I'm going to tell a quick story, and I think this will bring a lot of buy-in. So there's a person who is walking down the street, and they're looking frantically. It's nighttime, and they are looking under this street light, going back and forth, and they're looking very, very diligently for something. Another person walks up, and they said, "Oh, what are you looking for?" And they said, "Well, I've lost my keys." And the other person says, "Well, did you lose them here?" And they said, "No, this is the only place I can see." And oftentimes we see that with a CVE. Oh, this one is critical. Well, if you're not running something that has that vulnerability, is it critical for your environment? And are there controls? Do you have something in place that says this is something that is a vulnerability, but we can manage the risk? And the more detailed your information security program is, the more effective your operators and defenders are. And one of the things that I've been working on is in developing tools on Monday and integrating those to feed Teams or Slack with almost real-time updates and debate based on the conditional formatting in there, the severity level of what has happened. It goes to the right echelon with the update. And that's the important part, to find somebody who can help really draw that picture of what is happening and how so.
Yeah, I love that, and I love how your goal is to kind of tailor it for the right audience. It's not just for all audiences. And I love to think about like Log4j is a perfect like recent practical example of that, where you had a lot of people freaking out about the vulnerability because again, I mean, super bad, critical, right? But a lot of folks were worried, in cases where they didn't even use Java, and of course it's not critical for them. And then you had like the follow-on CVEs for Log4j. Some of them were just denial of service. And then there was one that, if I remember, it was also a remote code execution. Maybe it was something else, but it was labeled as critical, but it was like a super niche case, super like limited in its scope. And just like you said, there might be like some, business entities where, or whatever kind of organization entity where, that is very critical and something to address like in the immediate term. But, certainly for most folks, like in that case or other groups that, they just don't use that, they don't run Java, again, it's not going to be critical for them.
Right. And, there's a lot of small businesses that might only have 3 to 5 people. And, you might not have a whole CIO and a whole information security team to go and say, can you provide an analysis of this? Because that's very expensive. And I think that as a community, we should do better to say this is important, but it may not be urgent in your environment. And that goes back to knowing what's in your environment and how so. And that goes through building out, again, detailed processes. If you have a standard baseline and you can say this is when it was updated, I can check the logs. And we see that in items like ServiceNow if you work in the industry. But configuring that also requires a significant lift, a very technical lift to make the solution functional.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so cool. And one of the other cool things that I think you're working on is GRC&Me. I think and you've been DMing me a lot of like the screenshots of some of the work that you've been doing. It's so cool. It's so exciting to kind of see this thing go from where you were kind of talking about it from like a concept standpoint and actually seeing it getting built. And it's super sharp and it's, I know that it's going to be a very helpful thing for the industry and for a lot of folks out there. For the folks that are watching, do you mind kind of walking through what got you interested in that and got you wanting to create GRC&Me?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I found through this is about my 15th year in the security field of some sort, right? Either from the Department of Defense or now doing information security for programs. We get a lot of people with a lot of different talents, a lot of different abilities. And oftentimes, when we look at insurance or audits, they are looking at an assessment of your technical implements and they are going to make a decision based on the numbers. So I thought, what's kind of the things that stick with you that make it really easy to remember something? What are like the OSI model? We hear lots of things. Please do not throw sausage pizza away. There's many different mnemonic devices that enable people to remember that. And I thought, why don't we do this for GRC and kind of say, hey, what fits into GRC&Me? And let's educate people on the components that build an information security program and also reach an audience that may understand things differently. I think one of the things we hear is Google it. But the thing is, ask a critical question. And that if we go back to GRC&Me, we want to think about what are opportunities and threats in the environment. And a threat could be the vulnerability exists on Java, but an opportunity might be we have wanted to upgrade our appliance, our system, switch vendors. And if you have a good mapping between your key stakeholders that are participating in guiding your work and setting your conditions and deliverables and your customers, right? Wherever we work, we all have a customer. Either we work with them directly or indirectly. And if we provide them digestible methods and presentations and say, this is the 30,000 foot view, and this is a vulnerability. It is important. It is not urgent yet, but it will be when these conditions exist. And the more you can kind of plan for that, the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And it's almost like course of action planning, right? Just kind of like game planning around different decision trees, which while it's not thunderstorming, it's certainly easy to do, but it's not something that you want to be doing while it is storming, right? Whenever you're in the middle of it. It's nice to kind of have those playbooks already like pre-written and really drilled. And that kind of ties back a bit to your time in the Marine Corps. I'm sure there's a lot of that.
Yeah. Army, but that it's okay. We all do the same stuff. And part of that is just when you have something prepared and I've worked a lot of places and you have to also have a book. And at some point, if you don't take time to plan, the planning will come and find you when you don't want it to.
Yep. There's like the Ranger quote, if you're failing to plan, you're planning to fail.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Everyone knows
right.
it. But
and I think a lot what happens in this. Yeah. I think a lot what happens in this community is we expect immediate results because it's a computer. Oh, this should happen overnight. But what we don't anticipate is the implications and saying our services will be on or off, and this is what it looks like. And we have to integrate the people in information security to also understand there's a business aspect. Yeah. And that's that relationship you should have with your supervisor or your manager if that's your corporate structure, and say, hey, I see this as a problem and it will impact the corporate DHCP server. Well, we should know about that, and what's the implication, and what systems on there need a physical restart. And that's the planning that I think often gets overlooked because people say just Google it instead of saying define your SWOT, right? Strength, weakness, objectives, and threats. If you do a SWOT analysis on everything, you'll make great success.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't heard that acronym before. SWOT. That's super handy. Strength, weakness, objective, and threats. So,
right.
Yeah. One of the things that I've also really liked, kind of looking through some of the screenshots that you've sent. and maybe I'm not interpreting this correct, but it looks like you're kind of like citing what part of the compliance documentation that each particular line actually falls under.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think with like, Army, we're always looking at the different pubs, FMs, whatever. And knowing that you're compliant with that definitely lets you know that you're good, or theoretically, you're
Yeah.
doctrinally going to be okay, right?
Right.
That's still like a huge element with cybersecurity. How helpful can that be, and kind of that assurance that you are doctrinally correct, as they say, with some of the I say COA planning, but with some of the planning that we're talking about here.
Yeah, you made a really good point. And one of the objectives here is when I build this out, we have multiple projects working, right? We have one that we are building a security appliance to reuse hardware on site. It's built on the BSD platform. So, and we are going to create an API that will help build, because all of these checklists that happen, if you've used Tenable and SCAP and Oval, these automated languages exist behind the scenes. So why don't we have the computers do the work for us? And anything that you audit should be real-time auditable or near to, right? Now there are considerations when you deal with a large organization and you have, gigabytes of data that you're looking for on Splunk. You don't want to do star all and now, but you can
crash
set
your
time.
sim right away.
Everything's running really slow. I don't know why.
What's going on? Yeah.
And so we've already got the standards that were developed by NIST, and they tell you what the technical control and what it does. And the one thing that I found interesting as I've been building this out is we have different teams in the organization. If you read the NIST standard, and we have the different phases of an attack, right? We want to identify, detect, neutralize, respond, and then adapt, right? We kind of have this 5-phase structure, but we also have teams that overlap. Your legal team has a lot of overlap, but they're not in all of those. And I think the important part to convey is you can still have something happen, right? Remember, Target lost everybody's data, but then they came around and they said, look, we have changed these things and you can trust us because here's why, and we will show you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that point too, and it kind of makes me wonder, what are the different, I guess, problem sets that different size organizations have. So like, you'll have like a lot of like the mom and pop shops that are, maybe they've, most of them have probably offloaded their cybersecurity to some sort of a third party provider or whatever, right? But maybe some of them keep that in house. Or then you got like medium size, and then your international companies. What are some of the different problem sets that they have with this specific issue, and what are some of the common problem sets that they each share?
I think one of the largest problem sets is the price point for some of these appliances, and with the change to licensing. And again, my focus is not on a $1 billion organization because they can afford the terms and conditions for those services. Mm-hmm. But there are people who are creators and they don't have DMARC, right? Well, that's a huge threat. And now we're in this information warfare phase, and somebody can spoof your domain. And imagine trying to clean up if you sell cars like this, right? Let's say you die cast cars, and somebody gets your domain and then sends out something that is nefarious. What will be your adapt? And then can people trust you? Well, you got this thing that was associated with your name, and remember, Wayback Machine exists, right? And what does that do to your community, and what does that do to your product? So I think the component is to not come from a fear-based model, and then appropriate pricing. I have developed price points that I believe are effective for the different organizations, and we also accounted for for-profit and non-for-profit organizations and private use, because all of those are components that implement when you make a decision. And new hardware, if we want to reduce the effects of, changing out hardware, service interruptions, why don't we use what exists already? And there's so many devices out there that can be repurposed. You can, especially with the Thunderbolt technology, you can start to share resources across multiple boards. So we're focused on a sustainable approach too. What do you have in place? What do you own? And what can we life cycle without causing an expense to you and that upgrade time? Because how many of us have been in a life cycle upgrade? Tell me your favorite one.
None. Yeah. That is a trick question, sir.
And I think the important part is if we empower people. Remember, most of us all grew up making websites on GeoCities or MySpace, and we have become reliant on services. But if you look at the open source items that are out there, there's very strong communities behind them. Mm-hmm. It is educating others that, hey, you can do this too. And our community is available. So we're, that's what we're focusing on, to make it so we also are creating content that is digestible for different audiences. So if you have people on your team or staff that are autistic or need some sort of adaptive presentation, like, we are focused on figuring out how to present that information and how to also convey it and make educational material that's digestible. And if you've used anything like Cybrary, the content there, you can find creators that make something that, oh, I like this. And there's some people that I like to follow, but I only want to listen to a little bit. So I'll listen to 5 minutes and then I'll come back to that learning plan next week, because, sometimes they're so thorough that it's worth just a little digestion and a thought about it. Like,
yeah, 1000%. Sorry, Mike, you look like you were about to say something.
No, I was gonna say that's actually a really good idea. At least for something like that is, like you were saying, like with some of these people that are so thorough in what they're trying to explain, and even like with some of the stuff that even you're doing, like I think some people taking 5-10 minutes to watch, read, listen, whatever, and then like let themselves kind of digest that, and like you said, like come up with a thought or an idea or a question or whatever, and then go back to it a little bit later on. I think, a lot of people will be able to understand what it is that you're trying to convey a lot easier doing it that way.
Yeah. And as I've been doing this, I have a series of non-technical friends, and I have a couple compadres who are helping me with this. One is a security researcher and has work published with SANS, and another is an elementary school teacher. And they have both spent time educating, and we are able to have these conversations and say, well, okay, let me try to show you this idea. And it's forcing me to go back and really reach out and say, like, okay, let's explain this. And the important thing from our perspective in information security is not to come off as humiliating, right? Because a lot of people that you work for or work with they are very intelligent. Mm-hmm. And they have lots of experience. And if you present something that makes them feel humiliated or embarrassed, you are not going to be able to reach them. And they're going to come back and say, I don't want that. It didn't make sense. It frightened me. And we can really do a good job of saying, it's not impossible. It's not scary, but this is what the threat is. This is what it looks like. And this is how it will impact your business. This is how it will impact your insurance rating or your standing. And the more that we take the time to step away and instead of say, yeah, of course it's log4j, and say, oh, it's a vulnerability in Java, we can do better and garner more support across an organization.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that that's kind of like that's a really a big focus right now is communicating to all kinds of different people that, I feel like we I've talked about it like a little bit. I feel like we as an InfoSec community have struggled with communication. But I mean, there's a lot of ways that like I didn't even think about that you just talked about, like, neurodivergent people and, everybody that I feel like we've struggled with effectively communicating, some of these topics and concepts. I love that that's a thing that you guys are working on addressing right now. I think that's going to pay dividends. And also another thing, a little bit before that, I was just kind of thinking about it. Sounds like it is kind of a cliche. I guarantee you've heard this phrase before: reinventing the wheel. I love how you guys aren't reinventing the wheel. You're really recycling things that have been used before and then deploying that in other environments that really it's an upgrade for them. So it is more sustainable. I mean, think about all the hardware that we're just chucking out the door, that it's still mission capable, but it's not the newest that, and so we need to, I say we as in like we at the company need to upgrade. So we're going to kick all this perfectly fine hardware out, bring this brand new hardware in, and ultimately it's not the most sustainable. I kind of like that that's a thing you guys are working on.
Well, and I mean, you got to figure in the fact too, it's got to be cost effective for the organization as well, because you're not having to purchase, like I've heard it a number of times, the phrase, shiny object syndrome, where, these corporations just think, oh, to secure our stuff or to do whatever, we just got to keep buying all the latest and greatest. And it's, you're out here conveying the fact it's like, you don't have to do that. You can use what you already have. And we're just going to, kind of mold it into something else that's going to be just as good as a new bit of of hardware, but you don't have to spend all this money on it. We're recycling this stuff so it has renewed purpose.
Right. And we have another component about on the incident response phase, and I can't discuss it too far in detail, but we are working on implementing a technology to provide RFID tracking of when an asset is going to be transferred. Because if we have incident response people going somewhere and you're picking something up, especially if you're dealing with financials or there has been a crime in an organization or an alleged crime, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things you have to prove is, was it tampered between the pickup and the delivery? Well, we have a lot of gap between when it comes out of a locker and then gets checked in somewhere. So we're working on creating a technology to use systems that are in place and start to make it so you can check in and out and determine the location within 6 meters or so, right? And that'll be tied to the device, and you can have, again, an audit log and an audit trail. And think about when something happens in our environment, and then it comes back to, how did you know, who knew, and how was it communicated? And email is not the way, because just on the systems that I work on at work, there's thousands of notifications, because the sim is saying, hello, there's somebody did something, low level alert. And everybody's got those rules, so you may not check the email. But if we have something that's being conveyed in a channel and a chat, and then those updates happen, it makes it much easier to see when you log in the next morning or you're assuming a shift. And you can say, where's the change log? Oh, the change log already exists. Look at it from yesterday. And that's where I focused on the GRC&Me, right? If we create real-time auditable communication, and we can configure Slack or Teams to say this channel also needs to be recorded in another spot, right? And yes, Nicholas has been an amazing individual for this, because, like I said before, it forced me to convey things in a way that I was like, I don't know how to say this, because he has not spent the same years in technology, despite him working at a school and being a site administrator on Google Classroom. And,
I love it. How has, I guess, how has the progress with the project continued to this point? And, what are some of the exciting things you guys have, planned for the near term?
Yes. So what's coming right now is I'm going to be releasing a digital book that will, everybody who goes and looks at the book, the cost of the book is free. I will send the links and you can tweet them. But the book will have all the components from the phases in the attack framework, right? And at the levels of which part of the team should be doing it, along with some of the templates that I have already created, right? And people are free to use and adapt those. Hey, not all of this will work for my organization. So we're working on getting out that content. We are creating content that will drop at a predictable cadence, and kind of a little digestible, like, oh, GRC&Me, let's talk about risk appetite, right? And if you have an organization at all levels that understands risk appetite, you will find more people that will do that part of see something, say something, because the person who is doing staff work somewhere might say, oh, the door is unlocked over here, and it says this should only be accessed by authorized personnel. And, they can do a cursory look and say, you're not authorized. Your badge is yellow. Your badge is purple. And that helps reduce your incident response time, because now your incident response team will be able to say, oh, Caleb saw the purple badge at the room and snagged him up, right?
Dang, Caleb.
So if we kind of build that out, and then we're in the process of working with some incubators in the state of Arizona to try and get some funding and some corporate sponsorship behind this to advance. So there will be some opportunities that we are going to start hiring individuals. And what I want to say to this is, if you are in a field that you have worked in an analytical thought framework, right? You are an instructor, you are in mathematics or some other component, that learning a baseline of information security with about a 32-week program, right? Or not 32-week, 32-hour program, you can then convey these concepts. Because think about the people who do your risk, right? They probably are not the most technically adept, right? They might not know how to get all the way to the shell or root of a computer, but they will understand, okay, we need to go and make sure the Active Directory is configured in these components. So I would say, to anybody who's watching this, follow our content. And if you want to participate, we are looking for people to contribute time. And the first thing that I offer to anybody who can make a 6 to 8 hour commitment to our cause is that you'll get a license for Cybrary and a team, our team, to develop your career path into information security. And there's so much for audit, risk, security management. And if you are skilled at writing papers, that's also a great job. And that's something I enjoyed when I was in school. I liked to write papers. And sometimes I would say, I'll wait till, Friday to write a paper on Sunday,
Same. Yeah.
I'm that one.
Yeah. But if writing is fun, then it's like, you could probably bust out the essay in like a few hours and it's like, yeah, this is good. I'll turn this in. That's bad advice. Nobody do that. But I love it. I think that's so cool. And it's so exciting. And it kind of makes me think, actually earlier this afternoon, I saw a tweet about the human firewall. A lot's made about it, right? How it can often be, humans can often be the number one risk to an organization. But I think an underrated, they can also be an underrated strength for an organization. How it sounds to me like this can be a tremendous lever that can kind of transition, humans from being that quote unquote like greatest risk to being that greatest resource or, greatest, security capability that an organization has. Is that correct?
Yeah, I totally agree. And the thing is, the more people you have empowered, the more effective you're going to be. And sometimes our solutions are so overtly technical. Like, oh, you got to log into the F5 and the VIP and the like. What are these things and where are they? Oh, this guy's got a series of bookmarks. Like, I don't know what this means. And there's a lot of places, if you use Teams or Slack, that you can start to consolidate your information, and instead of siloing it, you can provide granular controls where appropriate, which there are components of a, like, if you are working in security, not everything that you work on should be shared with everybody else, because you may know something, you may have privileged information. But if the information is available to everybody on the security team who has a need to know and has access, now it's not, can you send me that file? It's, oh, go look at the files tab. It's posted under standards. It's posted under policies. And those things are the critical components that I think we really miss. If you've ever used any of the big SIM appliances, like, it can be hard to say, well, what's really happening? What's the picture? Oh, here's a hash value. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, and kind of to that point, like, or even to like further it, I've been kind of learning a little bit on my own about the pyramid of pain, and how like hash values are pretty low on the pyramid of pain, and kind of to illustrate or to describe kind of what that is like, it's the reliability of data. I'm probably butchering the proper description, but it's a reliability of certain indicators to prove something. So you have like a hash value, to prove that, so let's say, a piece of malware or a piece of software is malware, but, sometimes hash values collide, whatever, things happen. So like, that's kind of like low, but then you get up, to the, let me Google pyramid of pain real quick to do, I really don't want to, like butcher. I want to get this description right.
While you're doing that, I can, or we can have some other conversation, but like that's a good point. We want to also make sure that we assign how much integrity is assigned to a value. And
yeah. So like, here we are with the pyramid of pain. So we got like hash values down low, and then you got like, at the top, TTPs and stuff like that. And it's just kind of giving you like more of an idea on what's going on, and reliability with that information. But I mean, kind of, I say all that to say, you're doing all this work in like a SIM that really does kind of require some familiar, like we were talking about Splunk, right? You got to be familiar with like the search syntax, and you got to be, confident that the data that you're ingesting is well, one, reliable, and then two, is the kind of data that you really want, and stuff like that. And so a lot of it can be kind of complicated, and it blows up the challenge, and it blows up like the technical demand, I guess. But to your point, like, it's people at the end of the day, Well,
yeah. And the more that you enable them to participate, like, and now we have the ability to do these collaborations with, oh, let's just set up a bridge. And now bridges look a little different. And we have chat history and logs, but we are using, I think, the wrong tools to track them, right? Monday has been an amazing tool. And, there's a risk there, because if you lose connection to outside internet, it won't work. But we have found that, a lot of places, the internet continues to remain accessible even if your primary source is down. There's so many accesses to wireless and LTE, and our failover and access to these systems is a lot better. And again, we're working on ensuring that there's also an on-premise ability too. That's important for an organization that maybe doesn't want to share that data publicly, right? We would like to keep all of our stuff on premises. And I think that's important too, especially with some of the violations from organizations like Facebook, and people have felt wronged about, like, oh, this was done with my data and I was advertised to in this way. And, there is less trust now, because what are you doing with my data, and what did you gather, and how so? And the more people that we have who immerse their lives in this want the ability to be granular, especially if you're working on a project that you have a business or a trade secret. Maybe you don't want that information leaked at all, but if you're putting that into something public, there, it increases your opportunity for an exploit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Yeah. I'm so excited. I think, the work you guys are doing, it's so fascinating, and I think it's so interesting to kind of follow along. I'm excited to see where you guys go with it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious on what got you into what gets you passionate about this. What was like the spark that triggered? Well, one, cybersecurity is the thing I want to do, then GRC, and then GRC&Me.
Computing technology was always something that I found something like accessible and like, oh, I understand how this works. And it was kind of like, cool, now I have a robot that does things for me. It should do things for me a lot faster and a lot better. And I don't want to think as much, right? And I liked to, my favorite thing to do is to train people about how to do something and provide those opportunities to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, what is a sim? What is this? And again, we miss those basics. Like, we should know where in the OSI model you are. And if everybody has an understanding of how the OSI model works. Here. Okay. And as you educate users about what a physical connection looks like and where data is and when it's in transport, you'd be surprised how many more times they might say, well, I don't think that's secure, or I was able to open that file. And I have worked in organizations with really good user awareness and training, and they're the first ones that are going to say, I got this weird email. I had this malicious behavior and I unplugged my computer. Can you come look at it? Well, if you that takes your security to proactive, right? You now have your end users saying, my computer acted so weird, I unplugged it and I made sure to call the help desk number and validate, like, I'm really talking to the help desk person. And when you can do that, now your incident response is contained, because what if that malware that was on that device, what if it hadn't finished replicating, right? How cool is that? Because now that device is isolated, it's physically and logically isolated, and you're ready to start back tracing, and then your adapt is even faster. Hey, we got this. And and you can also, an organization can use that as an incentive. Hey, this person proactively prevented this. We're going to give them 2 hours off. We're going to give them a cash bonus because whatever, right? There's so many things that you can do in your organization and on your teams that doesn't require a bunch of sacrifice. But people want recognition for the work they do. Maybe in your weekly newsletter, and you say, hey, this person identified this, and they unplugged their thing, they followed these checklists, and they were able to save us $10,000. And the more that you can recognize people and their accomplishments, you'd be surprised what they will do for your organization. It's that, go look at NIST 853 and tell me what chapter 5 says. Nobody knows. I like to read it.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the words that I think is super powerful that you use, almost by definition, is empowered. You're empowering folks to, to kind of do this stuff. And it kind of makes me think about like Lapsus, how maybe their TTPs were implied recently on how they're really going after insider threats. And they've had these, huge scores lately. Some huge companies like Nvidia, Samsung, Vodafone, maybe Ubisoft. That's a teaser for a video tomorrow morning. Stay tuned. But had to. But I just say, but they put like a message out, basically saying like, hey, if you are somebody that wants to be an insider threat, here's what we're looking for. And they're not asking people too much. They're literally like, just give us a VPN access or a VDI, and we'll take it from there. And it's like that for folks that are working at a company, they don't feel empowered. Maybe they feel ostracized and they want to get one, on their way out. That's a huge threat. That's a huge problem. And I love how you're kind of in some ways going right back at that in more ways than just the training, but also through empowering them. And that's gonna kind of just exponentially return value with raising the quality of security, and also the awareness, and really the people's willingness to engage in activities like that can be very harmful.
Absolutely. And you also have to think too, like most organizations have a help desk, and that level of work is very exhausting. How most people who have worked at a help desk have said, I cannot do this for very long because yeah, right. What's your favorite help desk experience? And again, if all your users are aware of maybe not how every system works, but this system seems to be weird, or I would like help. And if those documents that are created are digestible, hey, if it looks like this, there's probably a problem. And sometimes we take these pictures of these really complicated screenshots. Oh, you got to look at paragraph 5 and over here, and if this button's clicked, show somebody what the misbehavior might look like. Oh, what is a system? When you read an instruction manual and it says like caution, warning, danger, and each one of those is an escalation of how much physical harm it probably can cause to you if it malfunctions, we should treat information security the same way. And we see that with data processing, with data classification, and with this program, and how we're mapping standards and controls to tactics and techniques. We can start to look and really analyze what is the behavior happening here that we want to change. If your company policy is 400 pages long, that's great for an auditor, but do you know what it is?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great analogy. I love that analogy. We're making things for systems and compliance, and not for the people that they actually are supposed to be consuming that.
Right. And the more you align, so we have our phrase is people, process, and product, right? If your people are not safe, if they're endangered, they're not going to be able to do any of the other components, right? Process is all of the how-tos, and product is what are you selling? A good, a service, a bouncy red ball. Like there's so many things to distribute, and that's why I'm trying to also reach out to small creators, because there's so many people in the information security field that could start to share their time. And hey, I know how to do DMARC. It'll take me 20 minutes. And here's how to do it. This is what we're going to do. And what I want to do is align this so there's also accountability in it. So it's not just like somebody said they could and they really violated like what the terms and conditions were. But basically, hey, here's your quick little contract. It says we will provide this service, and this person is going to coordinate with you. They're available at this time, and just sort of build that out, because the information security community should help content creators, right? Today on Twitter, I saw somebody that was talking about ports that had been open for games, and let's make sure gamers are also safe, right? Esports is an entire industry, but do you think that they want to manage a sim? No, they want to be real trained at whatever their game is, right?
Yeah, that's the people are, imagine the next Warzone level. You break out of that prison, and then now you have to, manage a sim for a little bit before you're able to dive back into the Warzone and go back to shooting people. That would be kind of a ridiculous thing. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe that'd be kind of fun, No, I'm twisted. But anyway, I love it. I think that's super cool. And I love that point that you make. It all weaves together into the bigger, industry picture. And, we can definitely integrate a bit better with other folks. So, I think we lost your sound.
Sorry, I had to move.
No
I needed to plug back in, and then we're also adjusting for sound quality in here. So
no problem. We'll need to kind of wrap it up here in just a moment. But
of course,
I did want to, we were talking a little bit about well, at least Mick and I were talking a little bit about, just burnout and kind of making it through, right? What are some ways you like to decompress? I saw you're into photography. My brother's also a photographer, so I was kind of like, that's cool. What do you like to do to kind of unwind? Because this can be kind of heavy stuff.
You're right. And some of the things I do is I do photography, and I shoot on a Nikon D700, and I also bake bread. I like to bake bread because it's always a challenge. So I've got sourdough starter, and last night we had some friends over, and they're like, "Oh, let's make bread." So I was like, "Well, tomorrow morning there'll be bread," and then they came over and we had bread, today. And I think the other thing that's really important is setting time. One of the things I found most effective, especially in the iOS environment, is setting scheduled notifications. That sometimes these cycles of like, oh, there's a thread. I have opened Twitter and had hundreds of notifications. Like, I don't have time for this. Like, I am busy. And it's okay to go in and schedule when you want a notification and how that's accessible. And I think we're seeing more of a culture shift to that, especially with remote work. Like, I'm available, my work will be submitted on the deadline, but right now I'm not. And this is what that looks like. So I would say digital well-being also starts with trimming notifications and, maybe assigning a particular sound to certain individuals. Oh, my partner sent me a message. That sounds like a duck. And like, oh, the person calling about my car's extended warranty, that sounds like, a dinosaur or something. So photography, baking, and I also do a lot of gardening. So those things are real nice disconnects because they can't go fast, right? Photography is inherently slow. Baking took 12 hours because the bread had to rise, and plants take time.
Well, I think.
What about you?
I was gonna say, just to compliment what you were saying, like, I think it's nice that your hobbies are away from a screen, and I think that's what a lot of people, I'm at fault for this, like I sit back, I'm like, oh, well, if I'm not, spending time learning, how to hack or whatever, or I'm at work, I'm watching TV or I'm on my phone or I'm playing video games. Well, all of three of those involve some sort of LED screen that I'm staring into, just burning my retinas even more. So
Yeah.
I really do appreciate the fact that a lot of what you're doing is separating and getting away from the screen, because I really do think that that's healthy.
Yeah, and for that desire, like you're saying about, oh, I want to do technology, that's why I chose photography, because if I am on a screen, then I'm editing, but I'm being really creative. I'm like, oh, I want to play with this. I want to make something out of it. And I'm not forcing myself to be critical, right? I'm letting that analytical part and kind of that thought process. And the more people that get into that, I think that generally you tend to be happier, right? Think about the days that you did a lot of mental processing, like, oh, I had to do 500 spreadsheets. You tend to be tired. But think about days that you did something fun. Right, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. I'm kind of an idiot, and I'm the opposite, where I'm like, if I'm not, I don't know, I like video games, so I'm always burning the retinas. I'm planning on going blind by 30. It's gonna be great. I like to see. Yeah, I got those blockers already. Right, it's great.
These are blue blockers. Actually, I actually have to wear these because there's been a number of times where it's like luckily I now have another room where I'm working and everything, but it's like there's sometimes like you spend so much time at the computer that it's like, oh my God, my eyes are burning, and they, that's why I felt bad, because it's like I almost feel like there's something called like, and maybe there is, I'm just making this up, but I think there's something called like screen exhaustion, where it's like I've spent so much time staring at a screen that I am just actually mentally and physically exhausted, and I feel bad because I'm like on this podcast yawning, and I'm like, I gotta stop, because it's not like, this is very, very interesting stuff, and I'm over here making it seem like it's not, because I'm like, oh, it's like, no, it's interesting. I'm just dead tired right now.
Yeah, I feel you. Long days, and doing a lot of stuff on screens and applying the brain power day to day.
Yeah.
Tis a thing. And then, but anyway, like off screen, I like to go work out with my wife. It's fun and exhausting. So I'm really just exhausted all the time.
Pause before you're like, and also exhausting.
Yeah. I'm like, my coffee consumption is at the industrial scale. It is shocking.
You've graduated to that level.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of always been that since like high school. I've always been more of like a coffee with my creamer guy, but like coffee with my creamer, like a lot of it. It's not good.
I found with my caffeine intake that I started to kind of plan, and I started to just like put on my calendar, and I was like, okay, I can have coffee now and I can have another one. So, and sometimes it's worth it when you're working on a big project and like, I really need to push through, but I try to balance that. And then I try to switch it up sometimes with tea, right? That you can get a caffeinated tea and just like, hey, something else is going in the system. Just one day, you'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those things kind of design us again, like how you would with a policy. Like, okay, I will just have a tea, and I'll see how I feel with it. And sometimes we just want a hot beverage, and there's some real good black teas out there that I very much like the deep flavors in coffee. But there's some really good black teas that you're like, wow, where did this come from? These flavor combinations. So.
Yeah. Fun fact, I took a class in China on tea ceremony. So I've had many teas, but I can't tell you I know a thing about it because my Chinese wasn't so good. Probably had to have like intermediate to upper level Chinese for that class. So I really went off of context, but lots of tea in that class. Lots of very flavorful teas out there. And especially like going like the way it's prepared. Yeah, it was fascinating. And it was all learned just through the taste and not through word for the most part.
Well,
anyway.
See, that goes back to like the GRC&Me. You still learn something.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I love it. Well, sir, thank you so much for jumping on. Thank you for, sharing your thoughts on this. It's so fascinating. There's going to be some links down in the description for those watching on replay, which, yes, I will put those down there. And, thank you so much for jumping on. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You'll see more stuff. We should have the book out probably, you know what? Let's set it for April 1st. It won't be an April Fool's prank. It'll be a real thing.
We got, and actually
more
Meg
April 1st stuff.
Yeah, Meg was talking about something coming up on April 1st. There's a lot going on, and it's all for real. It's all for real. Yeah, a lot of people are going to be a little suspicious about it, but
so for anybody else, we're at grcandme.com. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you can find layer 8 purple _ as the official account of it. And if anybody else wants to participate, again, we can extend a license for anybody who can make a 6-hour commitment a week. And that, if you're like, I'm brand new and I don't know how to use something, come aboard and spend time with the community that can give back and educate, because you will learn. And then when we are able to convey it to you, we have done what, the objective, right? We want to, again, people, process, and product. So.
I love it. Well, thank you again, everybody. Thank you for watching along. Thank you so much for joining, and be sure to join in next week for the next episodes. With all that, we will see you all next time. Bye.